afternoon, everyone. The House Tax Committee will come to order. As always, our first item is requests for bill introductions. Do we have any requests today? Seeing none, we will move right on to our first business item, and that is a hearing on House Bill 2394. I would first like to turn to the Revisor's Office for an overview on House Bill 2394, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2394 would increase the income tax credit percentage from 6.5%, the currently established 6.5%, to 10% for amounts expended in the current research and development activities tax credit, which is found at KSA 79-32182B. The bill also removes the limitations currently under the tax credit. It only applies for corporations. The bill would expand that, allow for all income tax filers to claim the credit. Additionally, the bill would allow for the transferability of this credit with the limitation that the entire credit would have to be transferred, and such credit would only be allowed to be transferred one time. And lastly, this bill was introduced during the 2021 legislative session, and under the bill, the changes would go into effect for tax year 2021 and thereafter.
So we would probably need to have an amendment to change that date.
If you're wanting it to apply prospectively, not retroactively, yes.
Correct. Okay. All right. Committee, are there any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Adam. And I'd invite the Department of Revenue, if they are here. Oh, there she is, sitting on the other side of the gallery today. Welcome, Kathleen.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Kansas Department of Revenue. Department of Revenue is estimating that House Bill 2394 would decrease state general fund revenues by around $1.02 million in fiscal year 2022 based upon the tax year 2021 effective date. To formulate that estimate, we looked at historical data and figured that it would probably increase around 30%. So that's how we came up with our estimate. For a point of clarification, I want to make sure that we understand in paragraph D when that does actually go away. Is that for tax year 2021 or is that for tax year 2022? And that's just a point of clarification that we would need.
Yes, if we move forward with this, we'll definitely make sure that is clear on when we want to implement it. Kathleen, do you have any data on how much this is used currently at the 6.5% rate under the current statute?
Yes, sir. I'll give you maybe 2018 and 2019. In 2018, there were around 183 filers that claimed it. For a credit allowed of $5.5 million. And then in 2019, for tax year 2019, there were around 181 filers and credit allowed of $2.6 million.
Thank you. Committee, are there any other questions for Department of Revenue? Seeing none, thank you, Kathleen. Committee, at this time, we will open up proponent section of testimony and welcome our first proponent appearing before the committee, Hugh Carter. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Smith, members of the committee. Hugh Carter, I'm Vice President of External Affairs for the Chamber of Lawrence, Kansas. Appreciate the opportunity to address you today. Just very briefly, on behalf of our 800 business members in support of House Bill 2394. It feels like it might have been an oversight, actually, in 2017 to restore this tax credit to C corporations only. We know certainly the pandemic has taught us a lesson here, maybe once in a generation, about the importance of innovation here to survive and thrive. And when it comes to disruptive technologies, it's just as likely that that comes from an individual or a S corporation, an LLC, or other pass-through entities as it could be from a C corporation. And so for the state's GDP and the interest of potential job growth that disruptive innovations can create, we'd just like to give this every chance and include every company in Kansas to participate in more research and development and incentivize that. So for these reasons, we just ask you to support House Bill 2394. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and take questions now. Committee, are there any questions for this conferee? I know you addressed this in your testimony, but would you explain a little bit of the history of what happened in 2012 and then subsequently in 2017, just to give everyone an understanding that?
Sure. I may not be the best on that, but my understanding is that under the Brownback tax bill or tax experiment, you might want to call it, we eliminated taxes for LLCs, and so doing a research and development tax credit when you're not paying income tax was fixed by eliminating the research and development tax credit. 2017, when we began paying taxes again there, C corps only were restored the research and development tax credit, and I'm missing the part if there was anything as to why other business entities were not included in 2017, but.
Okay. Thanks. And it's my memory. I know several members of this committee were on back in 2017, and I don't recall the specific instance that there was a reason that was left out, but maybe we can flush that out later. But I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Schmidt.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you give an example of, for instance, a company and how they would use this, how they would, what research and development they would do, just one or two examples that would then be eligible for this credit?
Sure. I'm really pleased that today we have a Lawrence company that's on the list here to explain how they utilize this tax credit. Proseco has a very good national footprint, but a small manufacturer in Lawrence. I know their sister company, but Build Smart does as well. But especially when it comes to, for instance, supply chain challenges that we have right now, anyone who can make innovations to overcome those sort of challenges obviously gives a great advantage to their business, perhaps to grow their business. And but it could be anything from new technologies, disruptive technologies that make current things that we do obsolete. And those are the ones that obviously have explosive growth. And you think of the Apples of the world. But if they're not out there spending that money on R&D, the chances of us having a Kansas company make those sort of breakthroughs dwindle a little bit. And the timing right now, too, just with the pandemic and everybody's struggling to manage cash flow, this is a really good injection, dollar for dollar, for some of those research dollars to help keep them not just solvent, but fluid. You bet.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony. Our next conferee is Curtis Sneeden, and I apologize if I did not pronounce the last name correctly.
Thank you, sir. You pronounced it perfectly. Appreciate that. I am Curtis Sneeden. I'm the president of the Greater Topeka Chamber of Commerce. Pleasure to be here with you today. I was planning to keep my comments short because my written testimony is in your stack. And in light of Mr. Schmidt's question, I think I'll shorten it even more because there's a gentleman here who can tell you firsthand what this bill means to business. My colleague from Lawrence is right on. This does represent a fix in a sense. It also represents a visionary step forward, and I'll tell you why we see it that way. We are sitting right in the middle of what is called the Animal Health Corridor that runs roughly from Manhattan to Kansas City. We're anticipating explosive economic growth here as a result of the federal facility MBAF coming online and a number of other activities, including the location here in Topeka of a global accelerator called Plug and Play. That sounds like a toy company, but it's not. It's actually a global enterprise that is all about helping startups incubate themselves and enter the world of major companies. Plug and Play has located their exclusive vertical for animal health in Kansas, in Topeka. Just a couple of years ago, they've already run 42 potential companies through their program. As a result of all of this, we anticipate great things going forward. Many of the innovations that we'll be seeing in the future will come out of those types of smaller startup companies. So it makes all the sense in the world to invest, make this relatively modest investment in companies like that who will be shaping our future. With that, I would ask you to support this bill, and let's hear from somebody from the industry who can tell you firsthand. Thank you.
Would you be willing to stand for questions if there are any?
Absolutely, sure.
Committee, are there any questions for this conferee? Seeing none, thank you. Well, we have apparently saved the best for last. I'd like to welcome to committee Alex Boyer, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having me. My name is Alex Boyer. I'm the Sustainability Specialist at Proseco Incorporated. We're a small, fourth-generation, family-owned manufacturer of specialty construction chemicals. Started in Kansas City, Kansas, moved to Lawrence in 2000, and have been there ever since. We are a little bit unique for companies of our size. We're only about 100 employees, but we have a very outsized footprint nationally because of our research and development activities. One of the main things that we do is we have a laboratory on site. We're constantly trying to innovate. We're constantly looking for new ways to improve our products. And we're always taking feedback from the field and testing them in new ways that we hadn't thought of until they show up in the field. One of the main ways that we've used our research and development over the past couple of years has been to kind of stay ahead of supply chain issues. Raw materials sometimes get interrupted, and we've had to reformulate, change things, everything on the fly. We do that through our lab, and we've been able to keep product on the shelves because of it. So another way we do that is we kind of keep ahead of what our products impact on the environment and the built environment and human health is. And then we can always, stay ahead of those changes and make our products healthier and greener through research and development through our lab. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, and I appreciate your experience. And I didn't know if you wanted to address this. I had a question on, could you run through the benefits of having the transferability that is defined in the statute? Do you feel comfortable addressing that, or more of the?
Unfortunately, I'm not an accountant.
Okay.
I'm on the sustainability side of things, so I'm a little bit more on the research and development and mainly research side of things. So I don't know the real inner workings of it. I do know that we do take advantage of a research and development tax credit on the federal scale, and we used to take advantage of the Kansas state statute before 2013. And we are unfortunately one of those companies that kind of fell into that gray area when it was reintroduced. So we haven't been able to take advantage of it for the last few years.
Okay, thank you. Representative Blacks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. Did your R&D, has it grown? Have you had a tax credit opportunity all your business life, or do you see if, say, for some reason this tax credit went away, how would that impact your R&D?
Well, the biggest thing is that, especially right now, it would cut down on the cost of kind of keeping ahead of the supply chain issues, for instance. This is a huge burden on companies, particularly of our size, that when supply chains are interrupted and then we're suddenly not able to get product out, we lose out on projects. And these are often several years in the making in the construction industry. So it can affect our bottom line for years. We haven't had that problem because we've been able to stay ahead of things, but that is a costly endeavor. And if we're able to get that tax credit, it would help us continue to do so.
And I'm really not opposed, and I think it's great. That's what tax credits are designed for. But it appears to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that your company had an R&D before tax credits, or not?
Yes, we did. We've had our laboratory on site for decades. And again, this is something that is unique for us. But it is, it is something that we've been doing for years, and we see the business benefit of it regardless of the tax credit, but it will help ease that burden and continue to grow our business.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here today. I've toured your facility a couple of times. Very interesting. So I know you've had some growth.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of tell us what your projections for the future are on growth? The product you make, certainly there's a huge demand for it, and it looks to me like
Well, we're pretty stable on our projections of growth. You don't get to be an 80-plus-year-old family-owned company without that. But one area that we have grown, and especially over the past few years, we purchased a new product line. It's kind of a masonry anchor product line, so kind of keeping within the same thing. We are looking to move that manufacturing in-house in Lawrence, which we haven't been able to do yet, but that would be a line of growth within our organization in coming years. There's also increased demand for our air and water barrier products. Green building is becoming more stable and codified in areas throughout the country. Energy efficiency is obviously a huge thing for building occupants. And so that product line itself is continuing to grow at a really rapid rate, as well as our concrete flooring products are often used on warehousing projects. Amazon, for instance, all of the Amazon warehouses, for the most part, that have been constructed in the last few years, use our products to seal the concrete floor. As the supply chain continues to change in the United States, warehousing is becoming more and more important. So we see considerable growth over the next several years.
So on a follow-up, the tour I originally took was with the fire department.
Yeah.
And we had a presentation on fire safety and how your products have kind of been very influential in changing the hazards to firemen.
Mm-hmm.
Very impressive. I guess my real concern is there seems to be a lot of potential for growth. I know you guys don't like to go real fast. I get that, but
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully with these tax credits and incentives, we can maybe accelerate it a little bit more than what you have in the past.
We'd, of course, be looking to invest and hire more people into our lab. As the cost of research and development drops, we'd be more willing to expand our product line into different realms, maybe some that we're not as familiar with, but we see an opportunity in. This is, that's the kind of, when the tax burden is a little bit higher for research and development, we have to spend as much money and time as we can just to stay ahead of the things that the supply chain issues, the challenges that we're facing today. Whereas if that burden's lowered a little bit, we'd be able to be a little bit more forward thinking, developing new products in that way.
Well, you have a great product. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Committee, any further questions? Representative Bergkamp.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Are you guys facing issues like other companies finding people to do R&D, or have you guys been fortunate to have
as of
enough
right
staff?
now, I'm not aware of any hiring issues for our lab. Being in Lawrence certainly helps. We've got access to, students who come out in chemistry and that realm. But it is, this is an issue in a lot of construction-related fields. Highly skilled workers are hard to find in many cases. And so there is potentially a challenge, but I'm not aware of any that we've currently been facing.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
That concludes our verbal proponents. We also have some written testimony, proponents of the bill. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as a proponent on House Bill 2394? Seeing none, we will close that section of the testimony. I show no neutral or opposing. Is there anyone that wishes to appear further on House Bill 2394? Seeing none, we will close the hearing. Now, committee, I would like to welcome Amy Kramer from Kansas Department of Revenue for her presentation, a riveting presentation, I am certain, on the sales tax exemptions for the state.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I am Amy Kramer with the Kansas Department of Revenue. And we're going to talk about sales tax exemptions today, our favorite thing. And I am going to just acknowledge straight up that there's a lot here. And so in case there's questions that I can't answer, then Kathleen's here. And then I also brought Roger Basinger and Carl York, who do our taxpayer education. And so they're out in the communities working directly with our business community, and they hopefully can answer any questions that I can't.
Okay. Representative Helgerson?
The rule is in this committee, whoever talks about sales tax exemptions brings Girl Scout cookies.
We won't hold you to that.
Okay.
I'd like to know where that rule is written, but Amy, I'll just informally, I'll ask you, do you want to field questions kind of as we go through it, or would you prefer to go all the way through it and then take questions at the end?
Your preference.
Okay.
Whatever's easier.
I'll go ahead and we'll consider this kind of an informal briefing. If somebody has a question as we're going through the documents, that is just a burning question, you don't want to wait till the end, I'd be happy to take questions during the presentation.
So before we get started, I am going to reference, we have a series of publications on our website that cover exemptions, and then also a variety of tax assistance for a variety of different business situations. And I'm going to make a couple references from our exemption certificate document, which is on our website. First of all, the understanding of the business community is that all retail sales are subject to sales tax, and certain enumerated taxable services, if those are considered taxable. So the retail, the final user of the good or service, those are considered taxable unless it's specifically stated that it's exempt. And those are, and you can think about it as three different categories. First of all, there are entities, so certain purchasers that are exempt. There are certain items or classifications of items that are exempt. And then there's also uses for a specific item that makes that application of that item exempt. So that being said, we did provide you, and I didn't print off the cover page, but a document that has, it's just page after page of little colored boxes. So, and I'm not going to go through every line. We're just going to hit the highlights. And if you see something you have a question about, then let me know. I'm going to start at the back, and our fiscal note for these exemptions is about $8.2 billion, and which seems like a large number, but there's a couple categories that once we get those categories out of the way, then that number goes down substantially. And then just another note is there are a few items that are minimal, and we're using minimal to define a category where the fiscal impact is estimated at under $100,000. So there's these three color codes. The first one are legal exemptions, and those are things that the federal government doesn't allow states to impose a tax on them. So the large category in the legal exemptions is, of course, the federal government, and then we have separated out in separate line items in the exemption statute 3603 and 3603 G, and those are the SNAP program and the WIC program. Those benefits are not subject to sales tax. And that's due to federal law. And then there are also some items that we've put in this category that are interstate commerce items. And again, those are things that are dictated by the federal government. And just so you know, before I go any farther, I didn't mention this, is we put these categories aren't in, these statutes are just in chronological order. And so it's just a mishmash. So in order to try to make it a little easier to digest, we've put them in these categories. There's nothing, necessarily magical about the categories. It's just to help. If you think something goes somewhere else, then we can move them around. The second grouping that we put them in are conceptual exemptions, and that's the green page. And the green page has the biggest one. It's just it's about 5.4 billion, and the bulk of that is 3606M, which is about just under half of the total estimate. And that is for ingredient and component parts. And so if you remember, the taxability is on the final user. And so conceptually, the idea is the United States doesn't use a value-added tax system. And so it's when a manufacturer purchases those ingredients or those components, those pieces that go into the manufacturing process, that those would not be subject to sales tax because that final end product will be subject to sales tax later down in the processing line. The other thing that I will point out on here is 3606A conceptually. There are a couple things that have their own tax structure that are tangible personal property, primarily motor fuels and alcoholic liquor have their own tax structure. So those are exempt from sales tax, even though they're tangible personal property. There are some exceptions to that where there is an excise tax on, for example, cigarettes and tobacco products, tires, and dry cleaning, where there's an excise tax. But then in addition, the legislature has determined that those items should be subject to sales tax as well. 3606N covers property that's consumed in production. So again, the concept is that during the manufacturing process, there may be some sort of oil or lubricants or, a certain portion of a manufacturer's utilities that would be consumed in the production of that product, that producer would be able to exempt. And then 36060 is sort of a companion exemption, and that is that's just to cover the unique nature of agriculture production, in that if you're producing livestock that's ultimately going to enter the food market, that you would pay tax on that final food product rather than the animal itself.
Okay. We have a question from Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this. But I'm looking at, you mentioned 3606N.
Uh-huh.
And you're saying these are items that are consumed in the production, right?
Right.
You mentioned utilities. So there's no tax.
There is there utilities, and I may have to phone a friend. We'll see if I can do this. Utilities, residential and agricultural utilities are exempt from state tax, but they're subject to local tax. Now, commercial utilities are subject to state and local tax, but a manufacturer on a percentage basis is able to determine that they can get an exemption on that portion, that percentage portion of utilities that they're utilizing within their manufacturing process. So it wouldn't be 100% exempt. It would just be, there's a formula that they use to determine that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Actually, that was kind of a question that I had too, and just to follow up even further, how do they determine that formula? Is that something they go ahead and pay their taxes on, and then they get a refund for the exempt piece?
I'm going to have Carl answer that question.
Okay. Please go ahead and introduce yourself for the minutes.
Yes, I'm Carl York, Kansas Department of Revenue at the Office of Policy and Research, and I go out and I teach this stuff. So they send a calculation to the utility company, and then from that point forward, they're taxed on whatever percentage is used for the exempt purpose. For manufacturing companies, the majority of it to run a piece of manufacturing equipment would be exempt, but the lights for the warehouse, that type of thing, would not qualify. Same thing with agriculture. They have consumed in production. If they have irrigation, the water used in that, the electricity used on a pump, that type of thing.
Okay, so that actually that's something they submit to their electric company if it's electricity, and then the company does that on the invoice.
That's correct. The utility company would then charge them sales tax based on that calculation, and so they don't have to apply for a refund then.
Okay, very good. Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you, and for at least help me understand, how does a tax determination, whether something is eligible for sales tax or not, is all of that as a result of a legislative driven statute, or do you guys have a one-person individual that makes that determination? Is there a committee process just as to whether this is a product that we should tax or not?
Are you talking about manufacturing? Or?
Well, just a variety of things. I mean, yes, manufacturing may be one of them, but certainly we understand the farm exemption. Some of that's legislative and statute driven, but others that may be gray would have to have a determination. I guess I'm asking, is that somewhat of a committee process, or is that just a one person or individual is coming up with that determination and hoping they're right, or how's that work?
Well, yeah, you're right. There are quite a few gray areas, and people have the ability to write for something called a private letter ruling based on their set of circumstances. And so that's part of what we do in our office is we get together and look at all the circumstances and see where it fits in the statute, regulations, any previous rulings, that type of thing.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A little bit along that line, I see, it's showing what I guess the sales tax exemption would be for something that's used in production. Is there a backside calculation of when that hits the retail level, what sales tax was collected? Does it balance off or exceed the amount that was exempt because it was used in production?
Let me see if I understand your question. I'm sorry. So are you talking about manufacturing? So things that go into the actual manufacturing process being exempt, and then they sell to a distributor? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, they come out and eventually go to retail and sales tax is collected. I mean, probably hard to determine what percent, but I mean, on the backside of it, some of that exemption is recouped because it's been sold at retail. Is that right?
Well, it would be in a business's markup and overhead that they pass along to whoever they sell it to. And then so the final consumer, the end user, will pay sales tax on the gross receipts, then the amount of the selling price.
All right, I think we'll go ahead and continue on. Amy, thank you for those questions. Committee?
Okay, we're going to move to the orange section. This is the long section. And what we've put in the orange section are items that are matters of public policy. And we have those grouped into a variety of subcategories. And the first category is charitable, religious, and benevolent exemptions. And these are a variety of charitable or benevolent causes that the legislature has determined should be exempt or excluded from sales tax. And these are the ones that are done by groups. The largest one in this category is 3606 AAA, and this is religious organizations. There are some other smaller organizations such as nonprofit organizations for multidisciplinary youth development. That's Representative Helgerson's Girl Scout cookies. You don't pay, you shouldn't be assessed sales tax on those. 3606 Q is nonprofit museums and historical societies. And there's some other groups such as nonprofit zoos, which is 3606 X, and then 3606 Y, parent teacher associations. And then the next category, and I categorize this one a little different, and I'll explain that, is charitable organizations by name. And there are 48 organizations in statute that are specifically provided a sales tax exemption. There are 24 in 3606 V. And those are primarily medical or health related, even though there's a few that are not, such as the Kansas Fairground Foundation. There is one group in 3606 V, the International Association of Lions Clubs, that is a category of groups, but it's in that individual. The rest of those are individually named. And I did put a fiscal impact of about $1 million, 1.1, for that group of 24 individually named organizations. There are 24 individual organizations that have their own subsection, and there's only 3 of those 24 organizations that would have hit that $100,000 threshold. So instead of putting minimal 20 times, then I just asterisked those. And those come up to about 1.5 million between those. There is one organization in that group where their exemption did sunset, and that's 3603 Quadruple L, which is the Gove County Healthcare Endowment Foundation.
If I could ask a quick question, talking about that sunset, it's fairly uncommon to see a sunset on these exemptions, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It is. That's the only sunset in, well, that one, and then the motor vehicle rebates that you've seen every 3 years. That one has a sunset. There are a handful that I can go through that were put in statute only for a calendar year or two. And we have 5 that were, well, four that are only in a calendar year. And then there's one where the equipment reference is so old that I'm assuming that nobody actually uses that one anymore. I mean, it's for equipment that was purchased by industrial bonds prior to 1973. So that one's probably not used anymore. So, and that Gove County one, that was specifically for the construction of a runway in Quinter. The next category is consumers exemptions, and that's where we see 3602 L, and that's your motor vehicle rebates. And that one does sunset in a couple years, in 2024. This category also, again, we had previously talked about 3603C, which is the exemption, the state exemption on residential and agriculture use utilities.
I'll interrupt you right quick.
Okay.
Representative Baker for a question.
One of my favorite things, the automobile sales tax rebates. We don't tax those, but we do tax grocery coupons. Is that correct?
That it depends on how the grocery coupons, there's 2 different types of coupons. There's store coupons, and store coupons is basically handled like an in-store, like a sale price.
Right.
So that price comes off before the tax is applied. A manufacturer's coupon is in essence, a third party. You as a consumer would take your coupon to the store, you would, and ultimately you are paying on that, and then the store would receive that money from the manufacturer after the fact, third party.
So let me get a little more real. I have a coupon for a free bottle of pop that costs $1.
Mm-hmm.
I still have to pay 10 cents in sales tax.
If you got the coupon from like Pepsi,
It's a manufacturer
a
coupon.
manufacturer coupon from Pepsi, yes, you would still have to pay the 9 or 10 cents.
And not to throw you a curveball, but sometime could you get us a dollar figure on what it would cost to fix that flaw?
On that, the issue, it's not, I have a fiscal note on that. And then the other complicating factor is there would need to be some changes in the streamline that would put us out of compliance currently with the streamlined sales tax agreement. And I know there's been a request for them to review that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Craig.
Okay, continuing on with, I lost my place. Okay, with consumer exemptions. This one is, okay. Okay, and then there's some smaller ones. We're on the top of page 9. Labor services for applying tangible personal property in conjunction with original construction is really the largest one in that category. There's also some smaller things such as bingo cards, natural gas and electricity for residential premises, 3606W. Lottery tickets is in that category, 3606EE. The most recent one in that one is 3606 quadruple M, which is on sort of physical gold coins, etc. The next one, which has the second largest category in it, is governmental exemptions. And the large one at 1.2 billion is 3606B. And this basically is that the state of Kansas does not levy sales tax on itself or its political subdivisions, so cities, counties, local governments. This 3606B also extends to nonprofit hospitals as well as nonprofit blood, tissue, and organ banks.
We have a question from Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the exemption for, I guess, the state and hospitals, do you know what the split is between like the state versus nonprofit hospitals?
I'd have to go, I don't know that I have, I'd have to go look and see how I determined this. I used a lot of different data sources to come up with these, and I'd have to look and see what I did here.
Okay. Yeah.
But I can take a look.
Okay. My thought just kind of went back to the whole private versus public, and if public's not paying, is that fair to private on more of the hospital than the state? But just curious. So thank you.
Right, and so this governmental one extends into some things that are smaller, that have a government connection, such as a county law library, 3606 triple R. 3606 triple O is sales made by public libraries, so fundraising type activities that the library conducts. 3606W, firefighting organizations, so those type of sort of adjacent governmental type functions. The next group is educational exemptions, educational institutions, and then the rental of textbooks are exempt from sales tax, which is 3606C, and then 3606H. A variety of healthcare functions are exempt from sales tax, primarily 3606P, which is the sale of prescription drugs. And then there are some others, 3606Q, which is insulin is listed separately. 3606R, which is prosthetic appliances, are outlined separately in the statute, as well as 3606 triple J, which is prescription dietary supplements. And then there are some users that are exempt, primarily 3606 triple C, which is healthcare clinics and clinics for the medically underserved. The next page is agricultural exemptions. The primary item in that category is 3606T, and this is farm machinery and equipment. And then there are also some smaller ones for 3606 double M, which is for a variety of things that are purchased to prevent soil erosion, as well as project exemption certificates, 3606 quadruple H, for machinery and equipment that reaches a certain dollar threshold. And then getting to the closer to the end, there are a few services that are exempt from sales tax. This is a small category, only about $5 million. 3603F, which is coin-operated laundry. 3603M, which is fees for youth recreation organization that's operated by a political subdivision, as well as some advertising and dues for certain organizations. And then the final category is some business exemptions. The large one in this one is 3606 double K, which is machinery and equipment used. This is integrated production machinery and equipment. It's a separate category. And then as well as the enterprise zone exemption, 3606 double C. There's a few smaller ones such as 3603S, customized computer software. And then as well as 3606, that's a J, which is meals that are provided to directly to employees. Those are exempt from sales tax.
Done already?
And I tried to summarize because I knew this is a lot of a lot.
No, this was excellent, and I've sat through several presentations where we just go alphabetically through these, and the categories that you've developed here are very, very helpful. So thank you for that. Committee, are there any final questions? I wanted to ask Colbert about that one. Okay. Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have the total number of exemptions listed somewhere? Did I see that on here?
I don't have it added up, but
it seems to me in other presentations maybe you have. So I would really like to know the total number of exemptions.
Okay, we're on the Apex bill used quadruple O. So we have that many in the exemption statute. So however many that 26 times, yeah. So and then in addition, there are some of these are not exemptions per se, they're exclusions. So 3603 is actually where the tax is enacted. So the statute says we're going to impose this tax except for, and then there's a variety of things that are outlined that we're accepting from the tax. But I can total this up and we can get it to you.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Blex.
Thank you for an excellent presentation. It's kind of been enlightening, but I guess I still have concerns, and you're probably not old enough to answer this question, but historically, I mean, it looks like just a hodgepodge of things. When is the last time a comprehensive tax evaluation of all these exemptions has been done? And who was involved in that and how that worked? Could you?
I can answer that a little bit, Mr. Chairman. The Sales Tax Act was passed in 1937, and there was a comprehensive review by the Joint Committee on the Sales Tax Structure. It was called the Hodge Report in 1970. And so in prior to 1970, there were exemptions for, it was a kind of a loose category called educational, religious, benevolent, and charitable institutions. And those were pulled out in 1970 as a result of this review. And then over time, these different things have been added. Something I would like to add to this document, and I just haven't done all the research, is to add an effective date as to when all of these were passed. And so hopefully next time we go through this exercise, we'll have that enhancement to the document.
Well, I seem rather ignorant about that, because about the only time I sometimes hear about a problem is when a constituent comes to as their legislature and wants us to solve it, or we've got a problem. And in their world, it looks like, although can't smoke in state offices, look like cigar back boardrooms that's sitting around with staff, figuring out what ought to be taxed and what should not be without other input, other than when we as legislatures bring in an isolated case where we want to bring an exemption for a great cause. But yet, back in 1970s, my gosh, there's a lot changed since then as far as technology on what should be taxed versus what is taxed. And
there also was a review and I'm not going to be able to get the acronym. There was a review probably 15 years ago by now, where a mechanism was set up where they had put together a document to provide some guidance to policymakers on, and Representative Gartner is profusely shaking his head, that provided some guidance on basically some of the thought process to go through as exemptions and tax credits were considered.
thank you for that. Looks like we're maybe overdue, Mr. Chairman.
I don't know if I want to tackle that this year. Representative Helgerson. Later.
I believe currently, if you deal with a group that is tax exempt, you're supposed to get a form that says they're tax exempt every year.
Mm-hmm. Those are issued is it 4 years or 6 years? 4 years? It's 4 years. Right now, you get a sales tax exemption certificate, and This is our sort of library of sales tax exemption certificates. And those are, like, if you get an exempt entity certificate, you get that. And sometimes they'll just, they'll keep it on file. And then sometimes every time you make it, it kind of depends on the type of purchase.
You're saying that it's provided by the department. I'm familiar with the blank ones.
Well, these are right. It depends. If you have an exempt entity, then we issue these, and you have these. And then there are others, like, for example, like a resale exemption certificate. You are supposed to present that every time you make a purchase.
But it's also standard practice that you have to have a new one every year. Most businesses that I'm familiar with expect to see a new one every year that says, and I'm asking the question, is that statutory?
I'm gonna look. Is that done by reg? Okay, I'm gonna phone a friend again.
You're gonna phone a friend.
Carl York, Kansas Department of Revenue. So, you're asking about resale exemption certificates and grading component parts?
Or exempt certificates.
Right. There's no, first of all, there's no due date listed on there. What that would be is you can, what they call blanket that certificate, meaning you don't need to get a new one so long as it doesn't go longer than 12 months between sales. So not more than 2 sales. So long as you have more than at least 2 sales within a 12-month period, you can keep that one on file. Now, we recommend that they get one periodically just to make sure they have accurate information on there. But there's nothing that says they have to get a new one so long as it hasn't gone longer than 12 months since the last sale.
Okay, if I might. X company is exempt under the statute in some area for sales on sales tax. Do they have, they sell widgets and they are purchasing, they come and say, Helgerson, we're exempt, here's our form. Do I require one every year? Or can I just have one and say, that's all I need now for as long as you're in business?
So, well, if it hasn't been longer, so what that says is that you're not required to get a new certificate so long as it hasn't been longer than 12 months. So it says if you have multiple sales within a 12 months, so what defined as multiple is defined as 2 sales within a 12-month period. So if it's 13 months since your last sale, then you would need to get a new certificate.
If it's been an active, if a church group or has an exemption under statute, which it does, they don't need to provide a form. But if they do provide a form and they use that on several different occasions, then they don't have to give it on a regular basis.
Well, they would need to provide their exempt entity certificate. It does have an expiration date, but you're right, as far as blanketing it, they have that same provision. They don't have to provide one for every sale to that same location, so long as it's.
So you only have to have one. If you have a regular customer, you only have to have the one.
Yeah, so long as it doesn't go longer than the 12 months. So
there was a provision in the statute that says a occasional event is not for a not-for-profit, I believe, that is for fundraising purposes, is not taxable if it is an occasional once-a-year type of event. Is that still in effect, and what's the interpretation?
Isolated or occasional sales.
Isolated or occasional sales.
So it's non-reoccurring event. That's the first criteria. There's
what do you want to define that? Then this gets back to your point here about definitions. This is ambiguous.
Well, we're just reading what it says. And
right.
So it's non-reoccurring. So it's not a regular ongoing event is what that would mean.
What's reoccurring? Once a year? Once every 3 years?
It's not scheduled the same time every year, that type of thing. That'd be a reoccurring event.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe Kansas is part of the streamlined sales tax agreement. So is that something that your organization participates in, like as far as conversations with other members? And then like, does that include discussion about like our current exemptions or our current tax base? Or is that more for like collection of sales tax?
It's basically a group of a set of states who have agreed to use these same criteria. It covers exemptions, it covers collections. They provide some simplified some opportunities for businesses to use simplified forms. It covers a variety of sales tax applications.
So like and I'm just thinking because I know a lot of times if one state exempts one thing but another doesn't, people might be tempted to go back and forth between the two states. So
it doesn't actually outline that these certain things should or shouldn't or can or can't be exempt, but it does provide some guardrails and some guidelines on some definitional things. So retailers are using the same kind of rules, and then it also does on some of these other exemptions provides some structure.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I go back a little ways, 6 years, and on this committee, and believe it or not, I think I've sat on 3 subcommittees that tried to tackle sales tax exemptions, and I'm not sure we really even surpass double G, because we were all scratching our heads and going, how do we tackle this thing? I think, and especially when you start talking, we've all heard this, someone will say, well, I'm a not-for-profit. I'm a 501c3. Well, I don't really care. If you're not in the statute, so be it. You don't get an exemption, but you start looking at C4, C7, C8. I mean, it just goes crazy. I think the smart thing we've done, hopefully on any exemption that should have been done years ago, is put a sunset on these exemptions and force them to come back and ask, can we continue? Here's the good we've done. Or like, we don't want to get like the Gove situation or the 73 situation where they haven't been used for years. Come back and tell us how you're utilizing this exemption. At one time, someone suggested to me, put all the not-for-profits, if you sell something, tax it. If you purchase something, it's exempt. So, I mean, that was sort of made sense to me back then, but I think this is something a really, really, just an interim with, that has plenty of time on their hands could tackle, Mr. Chair.
Are you volunteering for another?
No.
Okay.
Alderson.
I had Representative Baker next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I think, Representative, we had a presentation about South Dakota, and they had hammered out a lot of that stuff, but and that if we're going to look at those things, that might be a real good one to go back and revisit. So my question to you is about enforcement. How difficult is it to enforce all these terrible violators, and what's the threshold when you come and take my cash register away?
Well, they're not going to tell you that in public.
I don't know that I could address that.
So I guess I'll just simplify. How difficult is it to enforce all these different rules and laws on this?
That would be it. It does require a significant amount of effort. We have an audit team that kind of on the back end reviews compliance, and then we also have 3 people in policy and research that provide taxpayer education. We also have a group of field agents that are with that. We call it audit compliance and education, that will work with the retailers to help educate them about the law and to do some troubleshooting on the front end. Of course, we don't want to get to the situation that we're coming to your business and seizing your cash register. We try to try to help educate the retailers and provide them some education and assistance. And then if they are out of compliance, we try to provide them payment options and different things before we get to those situations.
Well, you do an excellent job. You're the best there is at that. I will tell you right now, because I've been in business and I've counseled businesses, and I tell them, whatever you do, don't miss paying sales tax. That you guys do a great job, and you do a great job on the education. You just don't tell us about it. You actually follow up on that. I think the people I see that get in trouble are the ones that are new to business, have never been in business. They don't understand. They see the money in the bank, and they have all these different people that need a little piece of that money, and they forget that money. I've always been in favor of just literally electronic transferring that money every day instead of waiting until the end of the month when the number gets too big, and that would be another topic of discussion on the sales tax, and that's electronic transfers daily. That's pretty doable today.
And I can also point out that we do work with the small business development centers to provide some of those training opportunities. I know Carl and Roger and then our other taxpayer educator do provide statewide a series of education opportunity solely on sales tax, and then they also offer specialty classes on those topics as well.
Thank you. Representative Epley, did you have a question?
Thank you very much for your report today. I stayed with most of it. I dozed off a little bit, but I can't help it. It's that time of day, and I'm sorry. You do a good job. If Mr. Hale had given the report, I'm not so sure, but I would have slept through more of it probably. But he's a nice man. Seriously though, you know, Chairman, I really think when you look at the net amount of exemptions we have, I think we need to codify or look at a routine interim committee periodically to look at these. I don't think we can do it during session, but specifically designed for that because, and I don't know where you draw the line, but I think that we should give that consideration and think about that because it's just so much money at play, and that way we could really provide other tax relief for maybe other taxpayers. I just think that's something we should look at on a somewhat routine basis rather than, I don't know, 1970 or whenever it was done before. I think we need to do it with some pattern of repetition so that everyone's called to task to come in on an interim and look at it. Probably be a 3 or 4 day interim, maybe, I don't know, but I think it should be done. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. And I have for a long time tried to think of some objective way to analyze requests for exemptions. It's not subjective, it's objective, and it's very difficult because there's so many entities that are so diverse. It's difficult to develop that, but I have no doubt that you would serve well on an interim committee. So, Representative Corbett.
So, my comment's just a comment. Small business people are not violators or lawbreakers. I mean, you got 35 or 40,000 people who are doing retail, collecting sales tax for you, working for the state for nothing. And I think they do a pretty good job. And sometimes when you take their hat off, it's not easy to get everything done, but they bring a lot of money to the state.
Thank you. Representative Helgerson.
As the senior member on this, back in the 80s and the 90s, we did the same thing. We had the same questions. And what Representative Epley, same goal. Let's talk. Let's figure out how the problems. There are some very clear problems. Like, I don't know if any of you, some representative from AAAs were running through the halls today talking about how they wanted to get exemptions for their AAA because other AAAs already have it and they didn't. Well, those are the easy ones that we should grab because they provide the same service, they provide a governmental service, and they should all be all tax exempt or all pay sales tax. Those are the ones we should grab as quick as possible. And the more difficult ones, you know, if we keep avoiding them, you know, the problem just gets worse. And the only way you're going to solve the problem, though, is to broaden the base of collection, and in exchange, you reduce the overall taxes. And I joked about the Girl Scout cookies. Girl Scout cookies, I remember, and I think I even introduced the legislation. We proposed having a sales tax on Girl Scout cookies. And this is when they were $1.25. They're now $5 a box, and nobody talks about the sales tax because the price has gone so much. You know, we don't want to have policies, but policies will help everyone in the long run if we just sit down and try to craft them out. And yes, I do volunteer.
Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. You've done an excellent job, and thank you to all your supporting staff. Phone a friend. This was a great presentation. It gives us a lot of good perspective as we do consider these exemption requests. Thank you. Committee, we're going to sit tight and see what happens tomorrow, I guess. If we're going to continue as planned, if anything changes because of the weather, I'm sure Leah will let us all know. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.